So we're now going to continue with our special Gem Education Day, and love to introduce Edward BOEHM from Rare Source in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And he's going to speak to us about rare and exotic gemstones that he spends his life working on bringing in from around the world. Edward, pleasure.
Thanks, Howard.
We look forward to hearing you first.
Thank you, Howard, and the Centurion group for inviting us to speak with you here today and the beginning of the Tucson show. It's the 66th year of the Tucson show, and it's going to be an exciting year, I think, for everybody. I'm going to focus on gems and minerals because I think everyone is somewhat intrigued by minerals, and since this show started as a mineral show, I'll have a few mineral specimens to show you in between, and but the focus will, of course, be on gemstones. So why Spinel will again be one of the hottest sellers this year is something that everyone asks me about. Every year, it's usually one of the hottest sellers, and they always want to know why. And obviously the range of color that's available, the beauty of the stone, the rarity of Spinel, as we heard earlier from Jameen, from Prima, and the durability. Those are three big factors, of course, for Spinel. But the number one is, of course, the beauty. It's such a beautiful gem. It's dispersive. It tends to be cleaner than ruby and sapphire, and it is, of course, a very competitive price in comparison to those two. But one of the most interesting things, and one of the biggest reasons that Spinel is such a great seller, is because it has a very rich history and lore that dates back to the time of the Black Prince's ruby, which is now in the Imperial State Crown of England. There's a lithograph rendering of it. It's right there in the center, as you can see. I don't know if my pointer works on this, but so the irony of it is that it's a Spinel that's been polished. It's very large, 170 carats, has a drill hole through the center of it, and the drill hole is capped with a ruby. So the Black Prince's ruby is actually a Spinel, and a ruby is sitting on the top of a very small one to cap that hole. You can see this is the depiction of it. So these rubies were probably all coming, these large Spinel rubies were all coming from an area in Tajikistan, which is today Tajikistan, along the Silk Road, which dates back to the 1st century BCE. And it ran through an area which then was known as, and today is also known as Badakhshan, but it's technically Tajikistan. These are some old facsimile paintings from Marco Polo's travels through the area. And you can see this river here, and then the two sides. In a moment, you'll see a picture of Pamir and the Kuilal area, which probably is what this was depicting. In the 13th century, Marco Polo reported that he found Balas rubies were in this same region. This is a modern-day photograph from 2006 of Vincent Pardue that Richard Hughes took when they were there together, and Kuilal. And that on the right side, you have Tajikistan, and on the left side of the river, you have Afghanistan, and then down there in the middle, that little green area, that's the village of Kuilal, which means gems. And Pamir, the mountains of Pamir, comes from the word Pomir, which is Persian for roof of the world. The mines are about 11,500 feet above sea level. The Timur ruby necklace was named after Timur or Tamerlane, who was revered as one of the greatest conquerors of all time. And he fought Genghis Khan in the late 1300s. And this necklace has his inscription on it. He became famous for building canals and dams and diverting rivers in the Pamir Mountains, which is likely where he obtained this Spinel. This is a 398 carat Spinel that caps the top of the Catherine the Great Tsar crown, also known as a ruby in their documents. And in the crown jewels of Iran, there are necklaces like this that have thousands of carats of these Spinels, or what they call ruby Spinels. And this is an example of some of the more recent production from this same area. Now, these were beautiful pieces that were found about 10 years ago, and production has decreased dramatically in the last couple of years. But this is the kind of quality that you can get from there. What I love about this is that if it weren't for Spinel, ruby would not be nearly as famous as it is today. So it's really interesting. The history of Spinel is much more important in our understanding of gems and royal regalia and everything than it is with ruby. Ruby almost is non-existent in some of these crown jewels. So we have a great history to pull from, and we have some good supply. We have supply coming from Burma. This is a very large one. This kind of stone doesn't exist very often, but it's a beautiful example. Stones are coming from Mogok, also from an area called Nanyasaic or Namya, where primary sources for red spinels have been really produced in the 20th century. This is an area just in Mogok, the village and valley of Mogok, where miners are hammering out Spinel crystals from the metamorphosed limestone marble. And here you can see what they look like. These Spinel crystals grow inside this white limestone marble, and you can get small octahedral crystals like the one there embedded in it, or you get some conglomerates of interpenetrating octahedrons. There's another one there. What's interesting is that Spinel, diamond, gold, silver, copper, they all form ideally in not only cubic, but in an octahedral habit. So a diamond crystal also forms in the exact same shape as a Spinel crystal. I always like to tell people they're fascinated by that. Sometimes you'll have them twinned or truncated, and they'll rotate, so then they end up with a triangular shape that's truncated rather than the octahedron, which is also typical of what diamond tends to do, especially in fancy colors. And then this is kind of the example of the epitome of the kind of color you can get in a Spinel, and you can see here why they called them ruby Spinels, because they really do look even better to me than ruby. Certainly more lively. Here's another example of a couple of red, beautiful reds. Anything in the 5 carat and above is considered extremely large from Burma. Other sources produce larger sizes, like Tanzania can produce much larger sizes, Sri Lanka as well. Then you have an array of pastel Spinels from Sri Lanka, Tanzania, Vietnam. The Vietnamese electric blues and violets are just incredible, very popular right now, especially the blues. So that's kind of fun to have that material available. This is a typical Burmese one, or no, this is another Vietnamese one, and here's another Vietnamese one. This one I actually have in my booth still. And here's an example of some of the Mahenge Spinels that you heard about earlier from Jamin, from Prima. This is actually an octahedron, and then some rough, this is typical of that material. Most of the rough that you see is in less than 1 gram sizes, so less than 5 carats, which would yield maybe a 2 to 2.5 carat stone. And here's some examples. This is a composite picture that Robert Weldon put together for me of preforms that we had, and then he took a picture of them after they were cut, so you could see kind of how the transition between preform and faceted gemstone and the kind of the range of color that exists from Mahenge. This is a friend of mine, Mark Saul, whose father is John Saul, who found the John Saul ruby mine. And Mark is very active in East Africa, particularly in mining of tsavorite and spinel and other gemstones. So this is on our way. That was on our way to the primary deposit there in Ipanco, and that's the old mine area. As you can see, there's some steps leading up to the top there, and that's where the original deposits were. But that was where material was found prior to 2006, and it was mostly lighter pink, not very fine quality, and very turbid included material. Later they were lucky in 2006 and found material here, which is where those incredible large crystals came from that cut all the amazing vivid pink spinels. They're actually found in 2006, but 2007 was when it was announced officially. This is the mining site there. And then here's some other associated indicator minerals of orange clinohumite and apatite and other things like that. This is photos by Vincent Pardue on one of his trips there. So we're going to jump back and forth to different things throughout this talk so you don't get too bored with just origin stuff. But one of the things that's important, I think, today when we're talking about gems and where they come from is that we have about 47 primary colored gemstone producing countries in the world. And they're pretty spread out, but one of the things that's very typical is that 20% of all the colored gemstones are coming from large-scale mine operations, just only about 20%. So when you're talking to your clients and they're asking about gems and where they're coming from, 80% or so are coming from what we call ASM operations, or artisanal small-scale mining operations. This is the reality of the market. This is exactly what's happening around the world, and this is what is helping these individuals, these families, to survive. So we do have issues in these third world countries. We do have things we have to deal with, and we are dealing with them as an industry very well right now. We're trying really hard to work on sustainability, transparency, and all sorts of other issues that are helping and giving back to these communities. But it's a reality that we have to deal with, and we have to help these people as much as we can. You'll hear more about this from Eric Brownmore, I'm sure, coming up in a bit. So 90% of these ASM operations are located in developing and emerging countries. So it's just a fact of the way things are. And so as an industry, we're trying very hard to give back to these communities and teach them how to better mine and do things more safe. But this is how it operates. So switching over back to the different ways that we get gemstones, we go to the mines, we go to cutting centers, we go to offices of dealers in different countries. This is an office in Colombo in Sri Lanka. And while sapphire, ruby, emerald, of course, are the three big stones that are selling for you all every day, I'm going to focus more on some of the other more unusual things through this talk. So here I'm going to focus more on what I think is the most interesting of all the sapphires is the Padparadscha. And the Padparadscha comes in a very wide range of color possibilities. But these are some examples of some rough, and it gives you pretty much the full range of what's available in Padparadscha. One of the issues today is color stability. Color stability in Padparadscha is a recent issue that's come up, and many of the stones coming from, not necessarily from Sri Lanka, but from Madagascar, are not as stable as they are from Sri Lanka or Tanzania. So when you subject them to certain stability issues with UV, they actually go from this beautiful pinkish orange to maybe more pink in color rather than a balance of the two. It can be reverted, but it does affect the value of the gem. So you need to get them tested. I like to show this because to me this is the ideal. This is a California sunset, beautiful. You get the same sunset in Sri Lanka, you get the same sunset in Africa and Madagascar. It is really a great example of what Padparadscha looks like, as well as the lotus flower from which the original name comes from. But the lotus flower comes in many different colors, as does the sunset as it changes. So you've got this range that exists, and people want to know, why is there a range? Well, there's a range in the way the sunset changes over a period of even 30 seconds. And there's a range of lotus flowers that exist. But Padparadscha comes from the original word, a Sanskrit word, Padma Raja, which means king of the lotus flowers. That's kind of where that comes from. This is more like the color of that, a balance of orange and pink. So if you want to come buy some gems like this, and you're here at the show, where else would you want to go than the AGTA Gem Fair? It's the show that has the most dealers that are going to give you the biggest variety of gemstones available, and they have a code of ethics, a code of disclosure, and many other things that are going to be beneficial to you and providing you with the information that you need when you're buying these unusual gemstones. One of the great booths that's there at the AGTA Gem Fair is the Smithsonian booth, and it's booth number 1800, and they feature every year new items from the collection that they bring into the show from their vaults. So it's always an interesting booth to visit, and it's lots of fun, and the people there that run that are great people. Jeff Post, Russell Feather, and Christine Webb. They will welcome you and talk to you about anything that's going on at the Smithsonian. They have a lot of new projects going on there. Some of the things on display there in the Smithsonian that you can go visit there is things like the 138 karat Ras Reeves Star Ruby, the Star of Asia, which is 330 carats, and a 58 carat chrysoberyl. Now, these are not the sizes that you can handle, but you do have a collector that's interested in buying gems, you'll see gems like this at the AGTA Gem Fair at different people's booths. We have an 18 karat star, but there are other people that John Bradshaw has interesting gems. There's going to be Rafco, Intercolor, all sorts of different dealers that have high-end corundum available in stars. I'm focusing on unusual things, so we're going to talk about stars. Star ruby, for example, which is really rare these days. A Burmese star ruby like this is extremely rare because most of the material is being heated to get rid of the silk and make it a little bit more red and turn it and facet it. So you're not seeing much in the way of red stars at all. And then chrysoberyl. I think you're going to see a lot more chrysoberyl this year. There's more being produced from Africa. There's more coming from Sri Lanka. But there is a very small amount of chrysoberyl that really has a high quality that you can appreciate and understand. And and there's very few dealers that carry the really high-end stuff. Monty Zychek, who's going to be speaking later, actually wears a cat's eye chrysoberyl ring on his finger. And it's a great men's stone. It's not that it's not a woman's stone, but it is a really great men's stone. And it's a protector, the eye of the protector. Unusual gems like Trapezie emeralds are always really fun to talk about. It's a great thing to start a discussion with a client who's looking at an emerald or wants some kind of unique gem that's a phenomenal gemstone. That's what we call them when they have some kind of interesting effect. In the case of Trapezie, the name comes from the wagon wheel or water wheel, and it's because of the spokes coming out from the points of the hexagonal shape of the crystal. And it's also reflective of the shale environment in which these emeralds are found. So you see the black shale creating this hexagonal pattern from the original crystal structure. And these come from a place called Peñas Blancas. This is what it looks like there, which means white peaks. So you can see the outcrops where you have some white areas, and the white areas indicate areas that you might find emerald material. This is the original tunnel at Peñas Blancas, and then one of the newer tunnels, that's Ron Ringsrud. He's a dealer that's here in town, also exhibiting AGTA. He has material from Peñas Blancas and Muzo and all sorts of different areas. You'll also hear from Monty Zychek about emeralds coming up, so I won't go too much into that, but here's an example of a seam in which you would find emerald material. And it's a very hard-working environment. This is a pneumatic jack that this miner's using, so it's not easy labor, but it's this is how things are found and mined in Colombia. But he's wearing a hard hat, he's wearing boots, and so it's about the most economical, most safe way to do mining there. So moving into another green gemstone, we have green grosser that we heard earlier about. Very popular gemstone. When it's this lighter green color, we call it green grosser. When it becomes a bit darker, we call it savarite. This is a rough crystal with it's not gold, it's pyrite on it. But that's a typical indicator combination that you'll see in Tanzania for this material. And the crystal on the left is a very fine, perfectly formed dodecahedral crystal. And this is a 20 karat savarite that we have at our booth, Combined C. It's from Kenya, very large size. Anything over 10 carats is considered extremely large in savarite. Bruce Bridges also has a nice collection of savarites that you can go see. There are a number of other dealers at GGX that also have them, but very few will have this size available, except for Bruce. Garnets will also be, in my opinion, top seller this year. So rhodolite, of course, is your one that people know the most probably, besides maybe pyro, but rhodolite's very popular. Rhodolite like this is extremely rare with this much of a purple. That's from Kangala. This is a spessartite from Loliondo and savarite from Komolo. So savarite from Komolo, almost non-existent now. That area is not producing as much as Marilani is. And the Marilani material is mostly going to be more grossular-like the lighter green. So most of the really rich, deep green material is still coming from Kenya, from the Scorpion mine and some other mines. There's an example of rough and cut of the Tanzanian spessartite. The crystals form almost like a ball. And some others from Nigeria, Mozambique examples. So this color is called Fanta in Africa, obviously because of the drink. And so if you're looking for a color and describing it as Fanta, that's what you're going to get. If you want more of a burnt orange, that would be in the middle. Sometimes you'll even get spessartites included in gemstones as this one is inside a topaz, like it's frozen inside a topaz. So in Tucson, one of the great things is you can walk around all these side booths and you'll find people selling everything from beautiful crystals to gems to minerals to even gemstones with special inclusions, which is a lot of fun. And so bring your loot when you come. And there's Malaya or umbellite, which is one of probably the most popular garnet today in general because of its affordability and also because it's so beautiful, it's bright, it has a unique array of colors and is very versatile. The name comes originally Umba from the Umba River Valley, but Malaya also, which means out of the family. So it's a mixture of garnet, which is between spessartite and pyrope. And so we call it a pyrope spessartite or Malaya garnet. It's much more flows better as Malaya garnet or umbellite. Most of these garnets, or many of them, actually exhibit a color shift in different lights, or up to a color change, but I call it more of a shift because it's kind of in the same general hue range. And you have now also the new pink garnets from Mahenge, which is the area that produced the Spinels, also producing these pink garnets, very bright. When they're cut properly, they're extremely brilliant, look almost like diamonds. Then they're light pink to pink pyrope spessartite or Malaya, or what's called pyrrole spite, which is pyrope, almandine, spessartite. So a really crazy mixture of 3 different types of garnet. They were originally discovered in 2015 and entered the market in 2016. Again, Prima Gem and Parlay have them at their booths. We have some. They're marketing them as Lotus garnets. Oh, these earrings are by my wife, I didn't mention. She designed those. She also helps me with these PowerPoint presentations, so she's a gemologist as well. So here's a Russian Demantoid set that we have in the booth. It's 3 stones totaling 11 carats. Demantoid is an andradite garnet, which is the most expensive garnet that exists. Material in this quality can reach up to 15, 17, up to $20,000 a carat, in larger sizes up to 5 carats. So we're talking extremely rare, up to the level of like a red beryl, red emerald kind of rarity. You know, it's an unusual gemstone, especially in this color. One thing to be aware of though, most of the material that comes in this rich green of color is actually heat treated. This is something that hadn't been disclosed over the years, but most of it is. Even though it's heat treated, it's just like Padparadscha Tourmaline. The demand for this material has not decreased at all, and prices paid are going up every year because they're so rare and so beautiful. It's a low temperature heat too. So, then there's Namibian Demantoid from, which is an amazing material, very bright, electric, doesn't come in near the saturation that you see in the Russian material, but you do end up seeing more dispersion from this material. So the trade-off is if you heat it, you get a richer green, but you lose some of the characteristic that makes it a dispersive material that shows flashes of reds and blues and greens coming off the stone. These pieces were from pieces that we owned that Adam Foster made into jewelry. He's kind of a big up-and-coming jewelry designer. He's doing really well. And he combined the earrings and the pendant with spessartite garnets from Nigeria. Now there's also Demantoid coming from Madagascar, and production has increased a lot recently. There was a problem with the mining area for a while that they now have resolved because there was so much seawater coming in, it was making it very challenging to be able to remove any material. But they've mitigated that, and they're bringing out, you'll see specimens all over town, but you'll also see cut gems and jewelry at Prosperity Earth, which is another new exhibitor at AGTA this year. The guy's name is John Ferry. He's very passionate about this material and knows a lot about the mining. And it's one of those few products that you can get from the mine to the market from the owner of the company, just like tsavorite from Bridges or some of the products that Eric Brownwart is selling at Columbia Gem House, where they actually own the mine and bring it to market. And then there's this incredible 11 karat, which if you're ever at the Smithsonian, I highly recommend that you go take a look at that. It's an amazing gem. It's in their gem hall in the special area. Well worth the visit. One of the best Demantoid garnets in the world. Another green gemstone that is very rare that you might see around the shows. Some of the very few booths will have it, but coast to coast at GJX may have some. Some of the other companies that deal in rare gems, we have a few. The one on the left we just sold last year at Tucson, and the one on the right is part of a collector piece. Those are colored by chromium. So Jameen mentioned earlier, all tanzanite can be heated except for the green. The reason the green can't be heated is because it doesn't change the oxidation state, doesn't react at all to heat treatment in the green material. If it's a yellowish green, or grayish green or brownish green, then it can change to a topaz-like blue almost. It's a crazy color that it changes to. But if it's this color green, it won't change. So they're definitely unheated. And here's just an example of tanzanite and grosser that got slipped in there. Nigeria is, along with East Africa, Nigeria is one of the biggest producers of gems right now. You're getting all these different gemstones you see here. This map was created by Jean-Claude Michelot. And you can just, anything from amethyst, beryl, emerald, tourmaline, aquamarine, topaz, spessartite, everything. But mostly right now we hear about spessartite and tourmaline. Those are the two main things that we're getting that are being traded. And you get high quality rubellite like this one over here on the left. Mostly does not have to be heat treated like a lot of other rubellite. Nigeria began producing coal and tin and columbite in the 1940s. And modern gemstone mining there didn't take off until the 80s. And it really gained momentum in the 90s. So we're talking about a relatively new source here. This is a new rubellite mine called Abuja Leather. This photo is courtesy of Jean-Claude and Zoe Michelot. And I believe Zoe has a booth in GJX and maybe AGTA too, I'm not sure. So since 2006, government initiatives together with the World Bank created Sustainable Management and Solid Mineral Resources Project, which focused on the reforming of mining and tax laws in Nigeria. And this created opportunity for artisanal small-scale mining and mechanized mining and increased production dramatically. Foreign investment's been encouraged, but it needs to meet increased standards for environmental management and remediation. This is the same kind of project that took place in Madagascar. It started going up quickly in Madagascar, but then there was a regime change and then everything stopped. These kinds of projects are happening again and again. We don't know what's going to happen in Nigeria. We're hopeful. Other places in Africa where it's hopeful that these kinds of projects will take root and help the mining communities as well as us as suppliers. Of course, the most sought after tourmaline still is the Paraíba, Cuprian tourmaline. We call it Cuprian if it comes from anywhere else besides Brazil, from Paraíba. But today that term really has evolved, and people do understand that it doesn't mean that it's just from one locality. And it is due to the presence of trace elements of copper, trace amounts of copper and manganese. You have to have both for the stone to actually change color. That's a 60 karat gem there from Nigeria. And it rivaled any Brazilian or Mozambique stone. It was phenomenal. And here's some examples of material from Batalha, from Brazil. So while there's no longer much production, or zero production basically from Batalha, there's still material coming from Malungo and Altos Tosquinos and in the Rio Grande do Norte area of Brazil, which is the northeastern part of Minas Gerais. And Wild has probably most of that production. They're going to be at GJX, so you can go there. But it's dispersed all over. Everybody has material from Mozambique, but very few have just from the Rio Grande do Norte area. And here's an example of Mozambique material, another piece that my wife made. These two photos were featured in Gems and Gemology, an article about that material. And this is the mining area. Mavuco producing most of that material. So you can see they're just taking the overburden away, and they're getting down to the laterite, getting rid of the laterite overburden, getting down to the gem-bearing gravel area where the material is found. You also are finding beautiful aquamarine from Mozambique. This kind of material is unheated and extremely beautiful blue, rich color. Another stone that we have in our booth here at the show. Namibia, in the southwestern part of Africa, does not only produce diamonds, but produces incredible tourmaline, incredible, we already mentioned the Demantoids, but also these blues that are coming out. They're indicolite to what we call sea foam, yeah, it's coming from Ochua, which is produced commercial to fine greenish to teal blue tourmalines, and Usakos, which produces mostly the finer greenish blue tourmalines discovered in the late 2000s. And this is examples of some of that material from Usakos. Johannes Brunner is the manager there at this mining locality. So they're producing small amounts, but it's absolutely beautiful. It's also known as lagoon tourmaline. Here's an example of the open pit. You can see the people down here, very small. It's an enormous open pit mine. That's the main producing area. And this is some of the material that you can see. This is the range of color. And it does heat treat into the more vivid blue color. So most of the material that you see out there that is that vivid lagoon material is heat treated. Here's an example of some of that. Some of it's not. Like these pieces all here are all natural color. Now we're going to skip over to rubellite in Brazil. Rubellite is still one of the most popular tourmalines out there, if not the most popular, because of its red color. Material from Cruzeiro is typically kind of a slightly orangey red color, whereas Nigeria is much more of a pure red. The name Cruzeiro comes from the cross that you see there at the top of the village, and the normal mode of transportation would be either horse or donkey, so you don't see much in the way of cars. But you see people with mobile phones everywhere. So these countries are leapfrogging traditional landlines and using mobile phones and material, and we're getting information about new finds and material coming out immediately in places like Brazil or Colombia or whatever. You can be in Bogota and people are on the cell phone immediately at the mine and calling back. I mean, in Muzo calling back to Bogota, and within hours people are there buying rough. So the competition is enormous in these places because it's no longer so difficult to find out what's going on, but still very difficult to get to. That's just a picture of me there at the mine. And a friend of mine who I got to visit all these various tourmaline mines in Minas Gerais, Adulio Maura, who works for Paul Wild Company, amazing geologist and very well connected. But just it's incredible that what's being produced there still. So the rough is washed and sorted at the mine at Cruzeiro, and it's then transported to a cutting facility 40 kilometers away. These photos are courtesy of Andy Lucas from Guild Laboratories, which is a very well-known lab in China, and of course started with Charlie Carmona in Los Angeles, who we are lucky enough to have here in the audience. It's probably, I would say, the fastest growing lab in Asia right now, maybe in the world, as far as recognition, rapid recognition of what they're doing to educate people about gemstones, mining, and source countries. A total of only 10% of production from these mines is facet grade. So these are the typical colors being produced. The prices of finished gems have increased considerably, particularly because of demand in China and Asia. It's stagnated here for a little bit, but I'm sure it's going to come back and probably come back even greater than it ever did before. Once everything gets stabilized with China again, we're going to see an enormous new demand for this kind of material. Here's a beautiful crystal from that same mine. How are we doing on time here? Good. So back to that crystal. I want to refocus again on the fact that in Tucson, what makes Tucson so magical is that you can walk around the AGTA Gem Show in the comfort of this enormous gem hall, talking to gem dealers, looking at faceted gemstones, and right outside the door are all these other hotels and motels, and they're full of mineral specimens and other gems as well. But the source of where these come from, they've all been brought to Tucson from all over the world, whether it's Africa, South America, Asia, what have you. They're here in Tucson, and it's your opportunity to not only see these gems, but also go to these other outside shows and really understand who's bringing these things in and how they're coming in, and what do the crystals look like that they come from. And they come out of the ground like this. They have to be cleaned up, of course, but this is how they're formed in the ground. Here's a gem cut from very similar tourmaline material, just like that, and a large 22 karat, about the size of a quarter. And now we're going to switch to topaz, Imperial topaz from Ouro Preto, Brazil. So Ouro Preto, the name means black gold, and it was named for the blackened nuggets of gold that were found during the gold rush of 1698. It was the capital of Minas Gerais from 1823 to 1897, and is today recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's one of the most beautiful cities you can visit anywhere in the world, and here it is in Brazil, right next to the Imperial topaz mining area. It's a colonial Baroque revival architecture that you can see there from that beautiful church. And the entire village is like this, so it's a wonderful place to go. So you can stay there and you can do day trips out to the different mines. It's also the home of the School of Mines, which helped in the success of that mining region. The gold is gone, but Ouro Preto produces the finest golden and imperial topaz in the world. So here you can see the range. So golden is the more yellow color, less expensive, and then you get into the peachy to the orangey pink to the pinkish to the reddish kind of color. That's kind of the range of what you're looking at. And this is a 17 karat imperial red topaz. So, and they can even get redder than that. There is a piece that we sold that was donated to the Smithsonian that's on display there next to the Hope Diamond. It's unbelievable. It's called the Whitney Flame. It's a 48 karat pear shape, and it's redder than that. So this is the old mining area of in the just outside of Ouro Preto, where original topazes were found. The name Imperial topaz was originally used in the 18th century to describe pink topaz from Russia, and it was exclusively reserved for the Tsar and the Imperial family. But today in Brazil, Imperial topaz was discovered around 1760. It's found in a heavily decomposed chloritic schist, and the crystals form in phyllites, and more geology stuff than you probably want to know about, but they're in a lateritic soil, and the deposit area is about 25 kilometers east-west that passes through Ouro Preto. Sorry, we're having a little...
And that's the only place in the world.
Only place in the world.
Only place in the world that Imperial topaz comes from.
Yep, that's it.
Private mine.
Huh. Well, that's not moving forward. Sorry, just a little malfunction here with the remote. Yeah, do you have one?
Yep.
Why that wouldn't be working. It says the battery's complete. Looks like it locked up.
Skip and start it back again.
Let me just see if I go backwards. No, I think it may just have locked up. There we go. So it just locked up. Okay. So there are numerous topaz mines in the region, but the two largest that have been producing, one is known as the Mineração Vermelho, which is the word for vermilion, from which the color comes from, and the Capão da Lana mine. The Kapow mine closed, but numerous artisanal mines have sprung up to supply demand, which comes primarily today from the United States, Europe, and the local market. And of course, China has a new appreciation for red topaz as well. Oh boy, got locked up again. Wow, I don't understand. Let me just close out of this picture and go back to here and see if we can
Okay, you got that.
see if that allows me to go forward. Okay. So this is the Kapow de Lana Imperial Topaz mine before it was closed, and it was a open pit. They used a drag line operation where topaz-bearing gravel would be transported to a hydraulic washing plant by this dredge bucket that you see here on the right. And then that was the washing plant area. Well, wait a minute. That's the washing plant there. And this is the washing plant. And today it's been reclaimed, and it actually, that original picture there, that's what it looks like today. So now it's just a big lake. So in Brazil, they're very strict about reclamation, making sure that mines are brought back to at least somewhat of their original state.
Do they wash with clean water?
Just water.
Just water.
Water that's been recycled, yeah. Mm-hmm. And then this is a pink topaz from Brazil, a very beautiful piece. Just as an example of pink topaz that can come from there. It's not just from Russia. And then you have bicolor topaz as well. Another booth that's at AGTA that's a fun booth to visit is somewhere in the Rainbow Collection, and they have exquisite colored gemstone jewelry, many of which are Spectrum Award winners and gem winners, and from some of the most talented cutters and jewelry designers from around the world. Their booth number is 1950. That's an 18-karat bicolor topaz bracelet that was designed and crafted by Randy Coffin for the collection, exclusively for the collection. A new mine that's popped up in that area of Oro Preto is the Bella Vista mine, and it is producing some really beautiful red topazes. So these are some pictures from Sergio Castro, who's also going to be in Tucson. He has, I believe his booth is at GGX, and you can see some of his production as well. That's him there. He's based out of Florida, but also Brazil. And some of the pictures from his mine. And some of the material. That's what it looks like. Beautiful red. Now, other mineral shows that you might want to go see to see museum quality specimens would be the Westward Look Show, which goes from the 7th to the 10th. That's the address. There are about 40 world-class dealers that are there. The museums go to this show to buy. So this is the kind of show, if you want to see museum quality, that's where you're going to go. You also can go to a show that's downtown on Granada, Fine Minerals International Show, Danny Trinchillo's house. It's right next to what I think was the Inn Suites. So that's that area there that also has lots of mineral specimens. They're much more affordable, but then this is another one that has gem quality specimens. And he also has Lawrence Stoller there exhibiting his amazing crystal art. And finally, the show that started our entire Tucson extravaganza 66 years ago is the Tucson Gem and Mineral Show, which opens up after the Gem Show, and it's from February 13th to the 16th. It's open to the public. You can bring your kids. You cannot bring your dogs, but you can bring your kids, and they have a great time. You can see anything from specimens that cost you $5 to $50,000 or $150,000. So it's a huge range. All the greatest dealers are there, and some of the smaller dealers, and some jewelry designers and manufacturers, and there's lots of fun things to do. So that's the main show that started this Tucson event that we get to call home. for a couple weeks a year. And thank you for your time and attention. I hope if you're here at the show, you can come visit us at our booth 406 at the AGTA Gem Fair. That's our team, my wife and Catherine and Molly will be happy to help you and show you anything that you'd like. And hope you have a great visit here in Tucson. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think
Oh, yeah.
there might be some
Sure, if you have,
questions for Edward,
yeah,
so,
any questions?
Ask away.
Well, you covered everything.
Yeah, a little, maybe too much, I don't know. Yes, Charlie?
Coming out of the Bella Vista, I mean, it's not gonna replace.
It's,
Kapow.
no, it's very small, very sporadic. Those were the two best crystals that he's found. So he has some, a couple of 5 carats, a couple of larger stones, but he already sold them. He's sold some rough just because it's quick turnover. He can get cash to put back in the mine. So right now he's just growing the production. It could become big, but it's still very small. Yeah.
But it's promising.
It's promising, yeah. And it's good to have some other source because there's nothing else available in the red, at least. There's no other red coming out from anywhere.
Edward, if you were a retail jeweler, okay, and you were looking for something special and new for your store, and you're primarily in diamonds, okay, looking at the whole world as you do, where would you go for 2 or 3 exciting either new ideas or something emerging that could be quite unique? Where would you go? How would you start to think about that based on what you've been presenting?
Well, I mean, for someone who's solely involved in diamonds outside of the top 3, which I think a diamond store would probably also already have or have knowledge about, I would go back to my initial suggestion of Spinel because it has a rich history. It's something they can talk about. They can connect it to diamond with the rough crystal and the shape and the morphology and how that, maybe resonates with more of their clients. And then from there, I think you could move into also Garnet because you have a different tier where you have Spinel's already kind of reached a nice strong tier. Garnet's still, really inexpensive and comparatively undervalued, I would say, and except for maybe the Demantoid. So I think that's an opportunity from a cost basis. And then I think just in general, just embracing colored stones as a whole and being open to the idea that colored stones can bring you a margin that is significantly larger than diamond. Maybe the sale total isn't going to be as big, but the amount of work you put in this, and the profit margin you're going to get back is going to be much larger. And you open the door then to all different kinds of colored gemstones, and it makes it more fun.
Mm-hmm. Now, both you and Janine spoke a lot about saprolite.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on saprolite right now?
Saprolite is a great alternative to emerald, for example. Emerald prices have gone through the roof. So the opportunity with saprolite is that you have a gem that's really similar in color, tends to be cleaner, is relatively durable gemstone. Maybe some would maybe say in some respects more durable in some cases because if you were to have some kind of hitting it against something or whatever. Emerald doesn't really have that issue per se unless it's really heavily included. But I think as an alternative gem, it's a good stone to go to. And it also provides, again, an interesting story. The name comes from the Tsavo Park in Kenya, which is something people can relate to. And it comes in a range of green. You can sell anything from the light green to the medium to the rich colored green, just like you have with emerald. So I think that also they celebrated the 50th year of the discovery of tsavorite 2 years ago. So it's still something that is something interesting to talk about. It's a relatively new gem. The name was coined by Tiffany and promoted and marketed by them, just like tanzanite, which is another gem that people know a lot about. So those two are really good stones to talk about and enter into the colored stone arena.
And my last question, and others of you might have, separate from sapphire, which of course is the main blue stone that most everybody knows about, and tanzanite, which you just referred to, are there other blue stones that should be looked at seriously by jewelry stores right now that are really emerging?
Aquamarine, I think, has certainly gained a lot of new demand and respect. a lot of supply coming from different countries where the color is just phenomenal, particularly right now from Mozambique and Madagascar. Zambia's always been a producer, Brazil's always been a producer. Both those tend to need to be heat treated to get a nice color, whereas Mozambique and Madagascar, you can get a lot of great color. India also has incredible production coming out right now. So you've got a bigger supply. So I'd say aqua for the light blue, rich blue, blue Spinel. Spinel comes in blue, so you've got another gem. The availability of blue Spinel is much lower. It tends to be also a darker tone. So not necessarily a darker color or more saturation, it's a very dark tone. So it's a different gem, just like a diamond has. Blue diamonds tend to have a dark tone. They don't have a lot of saturation, they have tone, and that makes them blue. So they're very similar. Interestingly, blue Spinel and blue diamond have very similar properties in that regard.
Paraiba Tourmaline, I'm sorry.
Paraiba I would not consider available in blue. It's so rare that I wouldn't consider that as like an alternative to sapphire, but certainly the Windex blue Paraiba is extremely desirable and extremely expensive. You know, we're talking about material today that's up to 100,000 a carat.
I was gonna suggest also another stone, and its only source is from Nepal, kyanite.
Yeah.
And the problem is it's a softer material, but the blue on it is similar to a tanzanite blue.
Mm-hmm.
It's very inexpensive too.
Yeah, that's true.
Are there any additional questions? Sorry to have asked so many. Laura?
Great, thank you for your attention
Let's give
and your time.